This is the second episode continuing the series of PC building tips. Today we will focus on selecting the right CPU, also known as the Central Processing Unit. I believe the CPU should be number one priority when building a PC because it is what controls your computer. Every other part would depend on the CPU to function. Some people might start by buying their motherboard first, and I think that is a good idea, as long as they know for sure which CPU they're buying. Motherboards come in many different shapes and sizes. Some are designed to work only with Intel CPUs. Others are only compatible with AMD CPUs. And that brings us back to the processor. To choose the right motherboard, you must first know which CPU you're going to buy. Before we dive deep into the markets that select the dream processor, you must first understand what a processor is. The processor is an essential component of a PC. It performs all types of data processing operations, stores data, and controls the operation of all parts of the computer. That sounds like a pretty important job. So wouldn't it be a shame to lack a good CPU? That's where Intel and AMD, the top CPU manufacturers, come in. I'm mostly concerned about Intel's i9-10900K and AMD's equivalent, Ryzen 9 3900X. Both are competing as the number one CPU. The Ryzen 9 boasts of 12 cores and 24 threads at 3.8 GHz, while the i9 has 10 cores and 20 threads at 3.7 GHz. It's not a big difference, but one can see the slight decrease in the numbers for the i9. Just to briefly explain what cores and threads are, a core is a single individual processor, so the i9 would have 10 mini processors put together, and a thread is a single line of commands that are being processed. Each application has at least one thread, and most have multiples. The core is the physical hardware that works on the thread. In general, a processor can only work on one thread per core, but CPUs with hyper-threading can work on up to 2 threads per core.
Now that might have been confusing for some, but just know that the more cores threads the better. Okay, back to bossbadi.
Now the Ryzen 9 is valued at about $423, while the i9 is at $488. But why is that? It's probably because Intel has better brand recognition, due to most PC manufacturers advertising the Intel chips they use. AMD's processors were only really used in the cheapest computers and practically non-existent on laptops. When you have little name recognition in an inferior product, your only option is to compete at a lower price. However, despite the extra money, Intel's i9 has a better single-core performance and also uses less power, 93 watts compared to 105. Additionally, with Intel's integrated graphics, you'll get both Full HD and 4K video and graphical support right out of the box. You'll not only get a great picture for both streaming video and playing the latest games, but you'll get awesome frame rates as well, preventing lag and screen tearing. It's now time to decide, do you want to live with AMD or stick with the slightly pricier Intel? Understand that the rest of the components you buy will be based on that decision. Be alert for CPU bottlenecking if choosing a crappier processor, which happens when the processor isn't fast enough to process and transfer data. A good example of which is to look at an AMD A6 5th Gen processor paired with an NVIDIA GTX 1080 Ti graphics card. A GTX 1080 Ti can easily run games with improved graphics details. However, because the A6 processor can't keep up with the processing speed of the graphics card, CPU bottlenecking happens.
No!
If you want to go for a medium-class CPU, go for it. Just remember that your choices for other parts will be limited, as buying a better graphics card would just be a waste. If you want the best in overclocking, gaming, or software support, or if you want productivity performance without buying a discrete GPU, you might want to focus more on Intel chips. But if you want the best balance of price and performance, then AMD is where you should spend your money. If you watched the previous video, where I talk about some of the parts I used to build my gaming PC, you would know that I use Intel's i9-10900K processor. Since I'm a little biased towards Intel because of their mass popularity and innovative products, that's the chip we're going to talk about, the i9. But before I decided that the 9th generation wasn't good enough for me, I had to do a bit of research on whether it was worth it or not to get the 10th gen over the 9th gen chip. The former has 10 cores and 20 threads compared to the latter, which ran with 8 cores and 16 threads. Another point to keep in mind is that Intel's 10th generation chips have introduced enhanced overclocking features, including per-core hyper-threading disabling, which may help those who like to tinker and tweak to get the most out of the CPU in certain situations. Comparing the prices, the 9900 is about $450, and the 10900 is about $800. If you already own the Core i9-9900K, is it worth forking out for the 10900K? The simple answer to that would be no, not really. The 10900K's clock speed bumps are relatively minor, Plus, the attention-grabbing headline 5.3 GHz speed is the potential of dubious value in terms of real-world usage. In my opinion, the 10900K might be overkill for most games, unless you're doing some serious work, but it's always good to swipe a deal when it comes along. CPUs can get expensive, so you always want to seize the opportunity for a discount if you can. I had to make a 10900K sniper program so it emails me when the i9 is in stock, because it rarely is. If there's something you want, but it's out of stock, you could code a program that would go on the website and notify you when it is back in stock. Do use their provided APIs or application programming interfaces to your advantage. If you don't know how to code, then try using websites like SlickDeals or DLC for deals on products you want, if you don't use them already, that is. However, be alert when using public websites, as other people are thinking the same thing. Once a hot deal has been posted on these sites, they're gone quickly. The processor I use is sold out most of the time, let alone go on sale. If you want a good budget, high-performance gaming PC, then you must put in the time and effort to do these things. So to conclude this episode, you can take away these 4 points. 1. The CPU is your number one priority when choosing your build. 2. When deciding on a specific CPU, make sure the rest of the components will be compatible and not bottleneck. 3. Use websites like SlickDeals and DLC, or make a deal sniper program yourself to catch deals. And finally, smash that like button as flat as the CPU. I'll see you later. Cheers!